Over the course of Volume 9, we were introduced to the fantastical world of the Ever After, and while right now it might seem like the Ever After is self-contained to Volume 9 and won't have any further impact on the RWBY series, I'm pretty sure that couldn't be further from the truth. The impact that Volume 9 has had already is very substantial, with the events that transpired with Team RWBY, and in particular for RWBY herself and how her character developed. But Team RWBY also had a lasting impact on the Ever After and the characters within it. Most notably with one character in particular, whose journey we also followed alongside Team RWBY's. The little mouse that RWBY first met upon coming to this world, who became and ascended to Somewhat in the final episode. And through Somewhat's ascension and the last exchange of words that Somewhat had with Team RWBY, I think foreshadows the impact that Somewhat will have in the future of the RWBY series, and foreshadows Somewhat's return at a crucial moment in the future. Upon first impressions, though, that may not be very apparent. From what we saw of Little over the course of Volume 9, well, Little didn't really leave that much of an impact. They were the first character that RWBY interacted with, and their interactions were very cute, but after that point, Little really didn't add very much. They were meant to act as a guide for Team RWBY, but had no idea of the world beyond their own acre, and were also asleep half the time. So Little honestly didn't have that much of an impact. But through their ascension, as they ascended alongside RWBY, it becomes very apparent that Little wasn't necessarily meant to make that big of an impact on Team RWBY. Instead, it was Team RWBY, and Ruby Rose in particular, that made a massive impact on Little. As Little ascended, you can see that their overall design, their look, the them that they decided to become through their ascension, resembles RWBY in a lot of different ways. They're now bipedal, standing on two legs. They have a cape very reminiscent to RWBY, and are very willing to help others, just as RWBY always wanted to do. Even though she was going through her own struggles at that point in time, the core of her character, that girl who always wanted to help others, to be the hero in that story, still shone through in Little's eyes, and left that lasting impact. And when they first ascended, Somewhat really didn't know exactly what their purpose was, and so asked Team RWBY for their own impressions. And the descriptions that Team RWBY gave of Somewhat are very indicative to the impact that Somewhat will have in the future of the RWBY series. Well, maybe except for Yang's, because although Somewhat is adorable, I don't necessarily think that Somewhat's adorableness will have a lasting impact on the series, though it might in the hearts of the fans at the very least. But the descriptors that RWBY, Blake, and Weiss gave are very important. Somewhat was described as a friend to Team RWBY, as a guide for those who are lost, as a protector of the Ever After. At least, that is what we are led to believe, that Somewhat's role is going to be that of the Ever After. They are a friend to Team RWBY, but also a friend to many others, as they will guide people's way in the Ever After, replacing the role that the cat has left. Because now that the curious cat is gone, there is not going to be anyone to help guide those who are lost to their ascension. But now that is likely the role that Somewhat is going to fill within the Ever After, to be a friend, guide, and protector to those who are lost, and that world as a whole. But it's not just that world that Somewhat is going to be a friend to, a guide for, or a protector of. And that's because of what is said in the next couple lines of dialogue, the exchange between RWBY and Somewhat. In particular, the most important line that Somewhat says, when RWBY hugs Somewhat and thanks them for everything, Somewhat says, "It will be all right, Huntress." Somewhat, even though they have ascended, they do not have the memories of their experiences when they were little. The impact that RWBY left, the heart does not forget, and Somewhat still recognizes RWBY as a huntress. As I mentioned in my last video, Neo does not have any connections to Remnant, but Somewhat does. Somewhat is a friend to Team RWBY, is a friend to people in Remnant, with RWBY's lasting impact on Somewhat, that RWBY pretty much inspired Somewhat's ascension, that Somewhat wanted to be like RWBY, and is now somewhat of a lot of things, including somewhat of a huntsman. So Somewhat is a friend to Team RWBY, a friend to Remnant, and will be the guide between those two worlds. Somewhat will be the one to guide Neo back from the Ever After to Remnant, and will act as a protector of both worlds. Not the sole protector, of course, because there's only so much that one mouse can do, but still, as the huntsmen and huntresses of Remnant are a protector of that world, so too will Somewhat, as a protector of the bond that those two worlds share in a sort of way. And I think that that will be shown when Somewhat is needed most. I can already imagine a scene in my head akin to Avengers Endgame, where Team RWBY and all of the huntsmen and huntresses that have been fighting desperately to fend off Salem's forces are now on the back foot. Hope is dwindling, and there seems no way out. Until a door opens behind them, and out comes Somewhat, along with Neo to help in the battle. And quite possibly, multiple other doorways open, and the beings of the Ever After, the beings that Somewhat, and Team RWBY as well, have befriended along the way, that Somewhat has inspired them to come to the defense of another world. Something of that sort, at least. We might get to see the genial gems again, for example, the ones that Jean left a lasting impact on, as well as maybe the Red Prince, if Somewhat maybe had gone back and, had a talk with the Red Prince, help them grow and not be such a brat. There's a lot that could happen in the development of the Ever After, and upon Little and Neo's return to the RWBY series, a lot of time could have passed in the Ever After. It could be a couple years that have passed in the Ever After when Somewhat and Juniper get the sense that something is wrong to the huntresses that they once met. The people that are close to their heart. Even if Somewhat doesn't exactly have the memories of them, they'll get the sense that they might be needed elsewhere. They will go to the tree and be sent to where they are needed most. Which seems like an extremely likely outcome to me. The fact that Somewhat recognizes RWBY as a huntress and has that close bond that still remains in their heart, Somewhat has those connections to Remnant, and will be able to guide both themselves and Neo to Remnant. And I'd like to think a lot of other members of the Ever After as well, to really show the impact that Somewhat has had in Team RWBY's absence. The positive change that Team RWBY has been able to influence on Somewhat has had a very large and widespread effect on the Ever After, thanks to Somewhat and Juniper's actions. That they've gone around, helped various different beings on all of the different acres, and, well, if they can all come to the aid of Remnant, that would be a very impactful moment. Even if it is just Somewhat, Juniper, and Neo that end up returning to Remnant in that moment, it would still be a, beacon of hope, but also possibly a permanent bridge between both the Ever After and Remnant. We did see the doorway close when Team RWBY and Jean stepped through to get to Vacuo, but when an Afterin goes from the Ever After to Remnant, maybe something will be different. Maybe the door will stay open for the Afterin to come back. Because if Somewhat does go to Remnant, they will be the first Afterin to leave the Ever After since the gods. And I feel like that's got to count for something. The doorway was left open for the gods and their creations to be able to return. Those were the words that the blacksmith said, and yet that doorway appears nowhere on Remnant. Whether in the thousands of years since the time of the gods it has gotten buried under rubble or was removed by the gods for some reason, we're not exactly sure. Maybe that'll be explained at some point, but if Somewhat leaves that doorway open, then that leaves, or rather opens up, the possibility for, I don't know, Salem to get sent to the tree? Salem to be ascended, and maybe that being a good way for her to be removed as an obstacle, or at least a way for her to come face to face with a power that she can never overcome. She thought the gods were her biggest problem, but they were just offspring of the tree, and the tree is probably something that she cannot oppose. So that might be a way to at least put Salem in her place, maybe remove her powers, or what have you. That'll be discussed in a separate video. For now, though, what do you guys think about the return of Somewhat, and the role that they will play? Although the impact of Little and Somewhat weren't really that wide-reaching in the scope of Volume 9, I think that Volume 9 is setting up pieces for a very large impact in the future. How the Ever After will be bridged with Remnant, thanks to Somewhat's help, and due to Team RWBY's influence on the Ever After, that will put into motion the course of events that will bring the two worlds together once again, which will be heralded by the return of Somewhat, along with Juniper and Neo, and maybe a number of other beings from the Ever After as well, when they come to the aid of their friends to protect their world and guide both worlds to a new future. I think that's a pretty fitting way for things to come together, don't you? Let me know down in the comments below what you guys think. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe and join the Guild of the Eternal Flame. If you want to catch me live on Twitch, talk about RWBY while I'm streaming, I stream every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Link in the description below, so come over and say hi. And I'll see you guys in the next video.